for this
Thank
morning.
you so much, McCoy. Appreciate it.
You're so welcome. And now you get to hold up. Yeah. Skin to skin and love them up.
Thank you so much.
So 3:30 a.m. my water broke and I was by myself. I knew that Ivan was going to be at work doing a 24. I jinxed myself. I kept saying it through my whole pregnancy that Ivan was going to be at work when this happened. Of course he was. So I was panicking. I called him. He was at work.
Yeah, I knew when the phone rang at 3:30 a.m. it was the real deal. The baby was coming, and of course she said, "I think my water broke. I have all this leaking and all this other stuff going on. I called the doctor. I'm freaking out." So I told the chief, and I was out of there. Got here probably 15 minutes tops. When I got here, her parents were already here. It was chaos. They were grabbing suitcases, supplies. Addie was upstairs grabbing clothes, finishing packing the suitcases.
Making sure my curling iron was in the suitcase, but yeah.
Yeah, we had all this stuff packed up that I knew we didn't even need, but to keep her calm, I just let her just go for it. And before you know it, we were in the truck, loaded up, and on our way to the hospital. So,
this is where it gets real.
So we pulled up to the hospital. There was 2 separate entries at the ER, one for traumas, one for labor and delivery. So I pulled up to the side. I got her out of the truck. We got a wheelchair waiting, and we wheeled her in. They did a quick temperature check in her ear, right? It was in her
my
ear,
yeah.
And they wheeled her in to go get checked in and all that.
But Ivan's check was, one ear was, what was it?
Well, I was telling the story, but you cut me off.
Sorry.
So I ran to go park the car real quick. I had a bunch of suitcases and bags, and I'm running. And it was raining that night, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were getting wet. So
yeah,
I
it was raining.
parked in the VIP, ran over. I had all this stuff on me. I could see her out in the distance. She was getting checked in, and they did the temperature check in my ear, and it came out to 100.8. And then the security guard and the 2 nurses were staring at me, and I'm like, I just got out of work. I'm not having a fever. Y'all need to check this again. The nurse was like, oh my God, hold on, let me check. Let me get a second thermometer. She did. She checked this ear, and I was 96. I was like, thank God, because it was going to get crazy.
Because Ivan has an attitude when he gets upset.
Yeah, well, because of the coronavirus, anything basically over 100 degrees, you're considered you possibly have it, and they wouldn't have let me into the hospital. So that was the first scare. It was quick. We were able to get in, and we got into our
like little waiting room area before we got into the room where, we were comfortable. I wasn't really dilating yet. I was feeling contractions, but I wasn't feeling his movement. So that was something that they were really concerned about. So they checked on the ultrasound to see if he was okay, and he was good at that moment. And then we just waited until we were able to go into the actual room for delivery.
So delivery, she was in labor for about 25 hours. It was pretty straightforward that first 25 hours. They gave her the Pitocin. Later on, towards that, they did the epidural. Everything was okay. Towards the end of the 25th hour, that's when everything got crazy.
I kind of vaguely remember certain things because I was so drugged up on medication. But so he pretty much got stuck. So he made it all the way down to 7 centimeters, but then got stuck. And then they were trying to move me from left to right to right to left. They even had me on my force trying to rock the baby because the baby's heart rate kept dropping every time they gave me the Pitocin, right? So every time they would increase my Pitocin, he would have a freak out and everybody would rush in, and it was like emergency go team. Like, this happened literally 4 times before they decided to put me into emergency C-section. And like Ivan said, I was within it was like 3:30 a.m., 4 o'clock. The following morning where they made the call of like, okay, from here, you're starting to have a fever. We have to give you the COVID rules, which was a whole nother game plan on top of what was going on with the emergency pregnancy.
So yeah, so like she was saying, his heart dropped 4 different times. Average baby heart rate's like, 140 to 160 at that time. It was dropping. I was watching the monitor anywhere from 40 to 60. And I was freaking out with that because I know a lot of birth defects can happen and other issues within the baby. And the doctors, like she said, doctors and nurses ran in. They were moving her, switching her, all
and it was
stuff.
very scary. It was the most scariest time of my life. I'm not gonna lie.
by the third time, I was basically like, what the hell is going on right here? What's the plan? What are we going to do? But I kind of got into it with the doctors. They were telling me they know what they're doing. It's not their first time. I understood that. I respected them. But this was my child. And to me, the third or fourth time with these heart drops and the Pitocin, and there wasn't any movement. There wasn't any more dilation more than the 7 centimeters. So I was getting frustrated, you know.
And I was kind of down out, so I wasn't really present for all this.
Yeah, so within, like I said, right around probably the 20th hour, they checked their temperature about pretty much every hour after the water broke, and she was fine. Right around the 20th hour, her her temperature started to increase. So I believe maybe hour 22, her temperature was 100.8 or 100.1 maybe, something like that.
So he fell asleep. And I remember waking up and calling my cousin because I knew I started feeling my fever in my ears, and I just start feeling the heat going up. And I was like, oh my God, because they gave us the protocols. If I did get a fever, that Ivan would have to come. He wouldn't be able to be there for the labor. He would have to be completely out of the hospital. And if I went into emergency C-section, I would have to go by myself. There was all these rules and regulations, and I was freaking out. I was extremely nervous. So I called my cousin, and my cousin was telling me to get a towel, wet it down with cold water, and just keep patting my face. So that's what I did. Obviously, it didn't work. But
so yes, 25th or 26th hour after her water had broke, the baby's heart rate had dropped for the 4th time. The doctors made the call at this point that they had to do the C-section. They ran in, they broke it down to her. She had to sign paperwork. They were talking
on my
about,
fours, pretty much. On my fours with all this stuff on me. I'm not going to go into detail, but, you know, and then they're trying to rock me back and forth to get the baby's heart rate while they're explaining the procedures to me of where I'm going to go next and what could happen. And I'm pretty much signing my life away. So it was very scary. And then here's Ivan telling me that we got to do this, we got to do this. And I'm like so tired and so drugged up. I didn't even know like what to think, what was going to happen. I had no idea. And then I knew Ivan was going to have to leave, which what they were explaining to us that at that moment that they made the call that Ivan had to leave the hospital.
Yeah, so while she was signing it and all this was going on, they were telling her, you might die. Would you be okay with a blood transfusion? Do you have a will? What is your plan? Like all these things that could happen with the C-section while we're at this moment, while we're signing, while all these doctors are now in full gowns, face masks, and the whole nine. So once she signed, we were crying, we were holding each other.
We were crying hysterically.
Yeah,
I knew it was real when he started crying because as a firefighter, he's a tough guy. He sees all this stuff. But to see him break down, I was just like, okay, like, what's gonna happen?
So after we signed and we were sobbing with one another, I remember asking one of the doctors, I was like, what kind of PPE am I gonna be wearing for the C-section? And she kind of gave me a look, and then she said, I'll get back to you, and then she left. So we just kept consoling each other. Once the doctor and the nurse came back, they said unfortunately due to her temperature being 100.8 that they're going to have the coronavirus protocols put in place. I'm going to have to go home, and she's going to do the C-section by herself. There'll be a nurse by her side.
And the thing that was kind of cool, like besides all this stuff going on, I feel like the nurses and the doctors, even though the circumstances was really, really crazy, they were so supportive and so sweet and really like down to earth. I think just with the COVID of our families not being there and him not being there, they were even crying like our nurse was crying with us to tell him that he had to leave. And it just got crazy. Even doctors, when I was crying, signing the papers, they came over and telling me that it was going to be okay and rubbing my back and making sure that I was not feeling alone. And that's one thing that I definitely appreciate. I became very lucky where even though Ivan wasn't there and even though my family wasn't there, I did not feel alone because of the support that the nurses had given me and the doctors. So with all that, I'm pretty grateful that they were able to, you know, provide that at least, because it was really crazy.
So right about the time they were going to pull her out to do her C-section, the nurse basically with tears in her eyes did yell at me, you have to leave now, you have to leave now.
Screamed at him. Not yell, screamed.
And I was at a complete loss. I'm like, I have to leave my lady. I'm not going to be able to witness the birth of my son. I just kept staring at them.
And the reason why she was screaming was because they were really rushing me out to go to the emergency room.
Yeah, the baby's heart rate was
dropping
about 40 to 50 at that time, and it was like gold time. So I understand where they're coming from, but to me it was just a big shock and everything kind of slowed down. So at that point, I didn't even grab anything. I mean, we left all the suitcases in the room.
Yeah.
I basically left. I just kind of walked out the door at that point in like the slowest pace ever. I found the slowest way out of the hospital. I couldn't even believe that I was leaving. They forced me to leave right now. I had a million things running through my head. Is she gonna be okay? Is the baby okay? I didn't know anything. So I left the hospital. I couldn't even look back. I just walked to my truck. I got in my truck. I know there was tears in my eyes at that point. I'm like, what am I doing? Why am I in my truck right now? Why am I not inside? My mind just kept racing. So at this time it was probably 5 o'clock in the morning, I believe. So I just drove home by myself in a complete loss of what just happened. I had no clue what my family was gonna go through. And I got home and I just was pacing. I was pacing around the house for a couple hours. And that was, like I said, about 5 a.m. And maybe, well, actually, just backtrack a little bit. The doctor told me the surgery should take about a half of an hour tops. So I was thinking, okay, it's 5 o'clock. Probably by 6:30, I'm gonna get the call from the hospital. I never got any calls. 6, 7, 8. By 8 o'clock, I started calling the hospital. Due to HIPAAs and regulations and all that, I wasn't getting no kind of answers. I kept calling. They would transfer me from different unit to different unit, to labor division, to the surgery division, and I wasn't getting anywhere. I was getting extremely frustrated. Then maybe like 9 a.m. or 10, I called again. Somebody eventually told me, she's doing okay, the baby's okay, that's all I can tell you.
Put me on the stretcher to go into the emergency room. He had left. I'm freaking out. I'm crying hysterically. I literally had that little towel that I kept putting on my forehead over my eyes to kind of calm me down so I wouldn't affect the baby anymore. I just kept telling myself I had to be brave for him, and I had to like calm down my anxiety for him to be okay. But what was going around me was the nurse the nurse that was taking care of us. She was so sweet. She ended up grabbing my hand and was like, Jeanette, you're not going to do this alone. I will be by your side the whole time. And she's crying with me. And she's like, I will be with you the whole time. I'm not going to leave your side. But what was also what I was hearing, because I'm on my back, I'm seeing the ceiling. I can't see anything around me. I'm feeling like everybody, I don't know if I was the first or the second or the third that had to go into this protocol of COVID, but I felt like no one knew what they were doing. Just in the sense of like, do we go here? Do we go there? Do we go downstairs? Do we go here? So it was a little bit of a holdup once I got into the emergency room. The emergency room was a little crazy. Like they were already in, the regular routine, which was fine. The nurses were, again, amazing. I had one telling me jokes. I had another one encouraging me, telling me to be brave, and she wasn't gonna leave me. Another nurse holding my hand. The scariest parts on that was they were drugging me up so fast because they had to get him out so fast that one woman was like, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel this? Do you feel? I couldn't even speak fast enough to tell her if I felt it or not. And I already started feeling them cutting, which I was already numb, so I didn't feel anything. But and they were already starting the procedure to take him out, and they're still putting stuff on me. I had to wear a mask the whole time of that emergency C-section. Was the worst because they put me on medication to kind of bring down the Pitocin, which then made me have the shakes. I was so cold. You just have anxiety, all this stuff is going on. Then you have this mask, and it just felt like I was hyperventilating. I couldn't breathe. And I kept telling the nurse, I can't breathe. Please help me take this mask. I can't breathe. It was just so much going on. And I remember her telling me, like, I'm so sorry, I can't take off the mask. You just have to keep it on. But she gave me like a cool air of like a tube that was probably like this much that like she put on my cheek. And I literally was like inhaling that like if it was a little cracked window. Because I felt like I was literally panicking and I was freaking out. And what felt like 5 minutes to me, I guess, at the end, the doctor had said it was a minute. They had pulled him out. I didn't even get to hear him scream or anything like that. He like a little, like that was it. And the nurse that was taking care of me the whole time, she's like, Jeanette, did you hear him? And I kind of like shook my head a little bit, but everything was just so slow motion, so blurry. And I guess they had rushed him out. And they worked on me for about 45 minutes. And then they kept me in that room for about 2 hours, quarantined. All the other nurses left. I was stuck with 4 women that were amazing, that made me feel really comfortable. but we were down there for 2 hours because they didn't know where to put me. They didn't know where I was going. I didn't get to see my baby. I didn't get to see what he looked like. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. I didn't get to see any of that.
So just to backtrack a little bit, when the coronavirus protocol came into play, they said that the test itself might take 24 to 40 hours to come back positive or negative. So we might not be able to see our baby for 24 to 48 hours after birth, depending on what happened. And then if she did come back positive, she would be in quarantine for 2 weeks and not be able to see the baby. So that was the biggest thing. The nurse at that point also told us that there was some tests coming back within like 2 to 4 hours, so we were very hopeful that that was going to be the case. So with that being said, I came home about 5 a.m., about 10 a.m., 5 hours later, she finally called me. She was completely drugged up and drowsy. I could hear that, but
I didn't have any of my stuff, any of my phone, nothing.
Yeah, so
the only phone number I had was my dad, and thank God he didn't change it in 20 years. But that was the only number, and I know his number, but I was so drugged up I couldn't remember the last 2 digits. Another nurse helped me get my information and call him. I still didn't get any call about my baby yet. When I called him and told him that everything was okay, the moment I hung up with him is when the nursery actually called me and told me that he was good. A nurse was holding him the whole time. She was emotional just as much as I was. She was crying on the phone, telling me that she didn't let go of my baby, that she was holding on to him until the moment I get him. And I just kept telling her, like, what does he look like? Is he light skinned? Is he dark skinned? Does he have hair? You know, does he have blue eyes, black eyes? Like, I wanted her to describe everything. And that made me hopeful. So once I hung up the phone with her, I ended up calling Ivan back and telling him that the baby was okay.
So it was a long 5 hours in this house. I just paced. It was a blur. I called some of my family. I was crying on the phone with them, explaining what was going on. I talked to her parents briefly. There was so many questions. There was no answers. Everybody was freaking out because we didn't know what was going on with them too. So that was about 10 a.m. At 11 a.m., she called me crying. Her voice was cracking. She said that she was negative. She was negative. She's like, come back to the hospital, come back to the hospital. I was extremely grateful. I'm pretty sure I broke down at that point.
Wait, can I say that one point though? When I found out I was negative, I was in the room trying to catch my breath of what happened. I remember the first thing I thought about was like, can I pump? Can I pump? I just want him. I don't want him on formula. I wanted him to get my milk. So the woman went out and tried to find me the pump the first thing, and then she brought me so much food. And that's what I'm saying, like, I don't know if I was the first or second or third or whatever in the scenario, because everybody was so overly like supportive with this. So she brought 4 sandwiches, 5 sandwiches, juices and whatever. So when she came back out, I was on the phone with my cousin FaceTiming and crying to her about like, I don't know when I'm going to see my baby. What do I do? What questions do I ask? I don't know what to do. She knocks on the door and was saying my name, and I just happened to look over. Again, I'm still drugged up and everything's kind of like wacky. She's like, you're negative, honey, you're negative. And I just lost it and I cried, and I remember telling my cousin, like, I get to see my baby. And then she said, hang up the phone and call Ivan. It's like she had to tell me what to do because I couldn't even comprehend what to do. And so when I finally called Ivan to tell him that I was negative, the nurse was in the room still consoling me. And I remember Ivan being like, okay, so what do I do? Do I go to the hospital? Do I not go to the hospital? Like, do I stay here? And the nurse was like, you know what? I'm not supposed to have him come up here, but I'm going to find a way. And so she pretty much sneaked him up to a COVID floor that she wasn't supposed to have him there. Mm-hmm. So she told him just to come into the car, go to the parking lot for entrance, and that she'll figure it out from there, and we'll give him instructions on what to do, which I thought was amazing. Like, who does that, especially in a situation like that?
And then again, before I even got back to the hospital, I remember talking to my mom really quickly on the way back, and she was like, keep the windows down, same as that, get a cold rag put on your head, because we were just, I think with the stress of everything, I didn't want to go back to the hospital and have a fever myself and not be admitted. So I kept the windows down. I was at the hospital in about 10 minutes, honestly. Same protocols.
Yeah, he got there so fast.
Right through the front door. They did the ear test. I was fine. I had to talk to somebody else. So I basically talked to 3 different people. I got my ID scanned and checked, and I was right upstairs. They actually forwarded me to a whole other wing of the hospital. They put her in the coronavirus wing,
yeah.
I guess.
Which is crazy because I was negative.
She was negative, but they isolated her there. Yeah. I'm like, this is insane. So I basically was hanging out in the coronavirus ward with her for how many hours.
Yeah, but it was so refreshing to see him walk in the door and to see our faces and us hugging each other, crying. I felt like the moment he was able to walk in, I was able to finally relax and actually finally sleep, because I was so anxious. I felt like I had to be on go mode about like my kid, asking the questions, blah, blah, blah. But I just went through a freaking war of labor. So it was really nice to like, that woman had let Ivan come up and be with me, because I finally was able just to like, once he came in, I slept for like, I felt like I slept for 10 hours, but I guess I was sleeping for 3. And then I don't know, I think he was pacing back and forth.
Yeah, I was just pacing. Like I said, they isolated us in this room, just me and her, nobody else. So we were just pacing around, and the nurse stated that that actually our room got filled. So when I walked in, somebody had brought all of our suitcases and bags into this new room. So the room that we were in at the maternity ward was already full. So she said that your child's okay, but unfortunately we can't see him yet until a room opens up. So now I believe about 3 p.m. or so, right? Is that when the nurse finally came in?
Yeah.
The nurse finally came in and was like, guys, there's a room finally opened up. Let's get you packed up and get you guys out of here.
Ivan was so excited. I remember being so tired, but him being like, let's go, pack all this stuff, let's go, let's get out of here.
Yeah, so
wheeled me out on a wheelchair.
Yeah, they came with a wheelchair, a little cart for all of our stuff, and we made our way down back to the maternity wing, which again felt like it took forever to get from one end of the hospital all the way to the other end of the hospital. But they put us in a room, and then I'll show you the rest of the video.
She is perfect. We just had to make sure Mama was perfect too. Okay, so now I'm gonna check these stamp tags. 65, 646. Yep, he's yours.
That's fine, baby. I have a baby.
Okay, so Julie said you need to do skin to skin, but you want to just hold him for a minute?
Yeah, I do.
Talk to him. Tell
Do
him.
I have to wear this mask?
No, introduce yourself. Guess what? I found your mom for you.
Oh my god, you're so cute. Hi, baby. I'm your mommy. Who do you look like? I don't know who you look like. You definitely have your father's chin and cheekbone. Hi, baby. You did such a good job yesterday.
I'm gonna step out for a minute because otherwise I'm gonna cry too. Okay. I'll be right back.
So little.
Hi, puppy. Hi.
Little man. What? What'd you say? Little Rome.
You're perfect. You're so cute. You don't look like an old man.
Hey, buddy. You look like Poppy. You look like Poppy.
Hi.
Ah, man. Can't believe this right now.